So I guess first things first, I haven't updated this channel in well over a year. I do have a second channel now that I'll put in the description, but I mostly just use it for personal things. I'll be using this channel for more, quote, professional things. I'm a journalism major in college now, and I also write for a couple of websites, and I'd like to use this channel for things such as reviews like this that I can potentially use as examples of my works in the future. So anyway, this video actually originally started as a multi-part video series that was about the history of the Harvest Moon franchise. But I decided that instead, I'll just review every Harvest Moon game, starting with the original here, and working our way up to the most recent 3DS entry. Um, Unless Harvest Moon Wii U, or whatever they're calling it now, somehow magically poofs into existence out of development hell. So you're probably wondering why you've been looking at footage of me walking as opposed to actual gameplay footage. I wanted to show you guys where I live. All of this footage is from around my house, where I grew up. Obviously, it's a very rural environment, and I even live on a farm. Now, I tend to love life sim games anyway, which, aside from Animal Crossing, Harvest Moon is the juggernaut of. But I do think the environment that I grew up in plays a large role in what the game means to me and why I connect with it so well. The game was actually created by Yasuhiro Wada, with the goal of replicating the feeling he got when looking at the countryside in rural Japan, especially in his hometown. In Japan, the actual title of the game is Bokujo Monogatari, which means farm story. Frankly, that's exactly what the game is about, and I'm not really sure why they chose to change it in localization instead of stealing the title of a Neil Young song. The overall goal of the game is to take your grandfather's rundown farm and bring it back to life. This is done over a period of 2.5 years of in-game progress, not 2.5 real-life years. Although, frankly, I've probably spent about that longer more on Harvest Moon games. Definitely more. You do accomplish a couple of other goals along the way, such as getting married, and at the end of the game, your father will evaluate how well you did. So obviously the main thing you're going to be doing in this game is farming. This of course comes down to livestock and crops. Just like in real life, you'll have to take into consideration what season it is when deciding what you're going to plant. Unfortunately, compared to some of the newer entries in the series, you don't exactly have a lot of options. It pretty much just boils down to turnips and potatoes in the spring, and tomatoes and corn in the summer. You can also grow grass between spring and fall, but nothing will grow during the winter. You'll have to use several different tools, including the hoe to actually prepare the ground for planting, as well as a watering can and a scythe. The issue here is that your inventory is really small, and so you're going to have to be going back and forth between the tool shed and your crops to get whatever tool it is you need. While crops are probably the easiest and quickest way to get a little bit of money, they're definitely not the best option. Raising animals will get you a lot more money, but it also takes a little bit more work. Once again, as the first game in the series, you don't have a lot of options. You got cows and you got chickens. With your chickens, you make money off of their eggs, and with the cows, you make money off of their milk. You have to do things like brush your cows to keep them happy, as well as feed your animals and things of that nature. You're also given a dog in the beginning of the game, and I guess he's sort of the series mascot in a way, but he's utterly useless here. Like, I'm not even exaggerating, he doesn't do anything except take up space on the screen and look cute. You don't even have to feed him. Then there's the horse, which compared to newer iterations of this animal is also practically useless. The horse gets a one-up on the dog because you can buy saddlebags for it, which will prevent you from having to run across your farm to deposit your crops and whatnot. But its downfall is that it cannot leave your farm. As mentioned, the game runs on a day-night cycle and seasons, so time is kind of crucial. You could save so much time by being able to ride the horse into the mountain area or into the town, but you can't. Speaking of, I am so glad there's a run button in this game. I don't really know how old you are watching this, but back in 1997, the concept of a run button was... Games didn't have run buttons, and they needed them. So I already mentioned marriage, and it's a pretty crucial element of the Harvest Moon series, so in each of these reviews I'll probably go through your options. In this game, the girl you choose really only matters for aesthetic purposes. So your first option is Anne, who's a little bit of a tomboy and lives in the tool shop. Next up is Nina, who lives in the flower shop and creeps me out a little bit. I'm just gonna blame Mirai Nikki for ruining pink hair for me forever. Next up you have Ellen, who can be found in the restaurant or around the animal shop, and I don't really like her either. Personally, I always end up going with Eve, who's kind of, you know what, there's no way to sugarcoat it. She's the bar whore. But she's a damn good bar whore, okay? Your last option is Maria, who is a sister at the church. So it doesn't really make sense that you can... I'm done. So while I personally only really care for Eve, a lot of these characters are mainstays throughout the series. A lot of the other town residents are as well, but they're really not that important except for some of the shopkeepers. I'll go ahead and end things with the graphics and the sound. The graphics are passable and somewhat based on A Link to the Past. I actually really enjoy the rain effects, and I also really like the way autumn looks. It's also really neat how your feet leave prints in the snow in the winter. And again, I don't know how old you are watching this, but back in 1997, things were a little different. Games were simpler. In a modern game, an effect like footprints in the snow would be expected no matter what the game is. Now we're back in the 16-bit era, that was some extreme attention to detail. Sound-wise, there's honestly not a lot going on. At this point in the review, I'll probably have used up about half of the soundtrack as background filler. Beyond the limited number of tracks, none of them are really that good. They're not bad, I don't guess, but after a while they just kind of exist. You don't really pay attention to them while you're playing. So in conclusion, while Harvest Moon for the Super Nintendo is a very good game for its time, I don't think it's aged well, and I especially don't think this is a good jumping in point for someone who isn't already a fan of the series. Don't get me wrong, this game deserves your respect. This is where it all began, and this is what introduced a lot of the icons, from the dog to some of the main characters and the general aesthetics of the series. But compared to newer entries, there's just so little to do. Because of the game's short length, it's actually pretty accessible, and I've played through it multiple times over the years, despite the fact that it's not really my favorite Harvest Moon game. Oh, but it's not the worst. My god, is it not the worst. So that's it for now. My name is Fenris, and I hope you'll stick with me through this whole series. Next time we'll be taking a look at Harvest Moon Game Boy. I'm going to be reviewing these games in chronological order from their release, and possibly even delving into some spin-offs such as Rune Factory at some point. That said, please subscribe so that you won't miss anything, and Peanut Butter Gamer, if you're watching this, then you're my senpai, and you should notice me. Please.